Clint Eastwood sits across from the smirking reporter, the stage lights reflecting off his weathered face. He's been here before. Countless interviews, countless challenges. But this one is different. The energy in the room is hostile, charged. The audience, hand-picked, leans forward, some eager to watch a legend crumble under pressure. The reporter, a young, self-assured, liberal journalist with a reputation for takedowns, adjusts his mic and grins. This isn't just an interview, it's an ambush. "Mr. Eastwood," he begins, voice dripping with condescension, "you've built a career on outdated masculinity and problematic narratives. Do you think Hollywood should finally move on from your era?" A murmur ripples through the audience. The question isn't just an attack, it's a challenge. It's a statement meant to dismiss an icon in front of millions. Clint Eastwood doesn't flinch. He doesn't even blink. He lets the silence stretch, the weight of the moment pressing down. The crowd is waiting, some for him to falter, others for him to fire back. But Eastwood has played this game longer than his critic has been alive. The old gunslinger leans forward slightly, his steel-grey eyes locked onto the reporter. And then he speaks. Before we get into today's story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's get started. The network had planned this for weeks. The executives, desperate for ratings, knew exactly what they were doing when they booked Clint Eastwood. They didn't want an interview. They wanted a spectacle, a takedown. The production team hand-picked the host, a sharp-tongued, liberal journalist known for grilling conservative figures, cutting them off mid-sentence, twisting their words, and making them look outdated, foolish, or even dangerous. They chose a live audience carefully, young, progressive, eager to cheer at every jab and laugh at every stumble. They even leaked teasers to social media, hyping up the showdown as the moment Clint Eastwood gets exposed. Before Clint even stepped onto the set, the cards were stacked against him. The pre-interview questions sent to his team were a smokescreen, polite and professional. But behind the scenes, the real script was being written. Loaded questions, baiting comments, an entire segment designed to make him look like a relic of the past. The producers whispered in the host's earpiece, reminding him to cut Clint off, to push him, to frustrate him until he either exploded or crumbled under pressure. Either way, it would be viral gold. As Eastwood entered the studio, the trap was already set. The lighting was intentionally harsh, casting shadows that made him look older, more worn. The audience had been coached. Laugh when the host lands a punch. Boo subtly when Eastwood speaks. The teleprompter flashed cues for the host, each question laced with an agenda. Toxic masculinity, out of touch, harmful messages in cinema. Clint took his seat, unshaken as the cameras rolled. The host smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. The producers leaned in, watching from behind the glass, waiting for the moment they could cut a headline-grabbing clip. The interview had begun, but this wasn't a conversation. It was an execution, and they were sure the legend wouldn't survive it. The host leans forward, his smirk widening as he glances at his notes. He knows exactly how this will go: poke, prod, humiliate, and before long, Clint Eastwood will either lash out or look like a fossil unable to keep up. Either way, it'll be a win for the network. "So, Clint," the host begins, his tone exaggeratedly polite, "you've been in this industry for, 60 years? And yet, your films still glorify outdated, hyper-masculine tropes, gunslingers, Vigilantes, men who solve their problems with violence. Do you ever stop and think, maybe it's time to evolve? A few members of the audience chuckle. Others nod in approval. The question isn't an invitation for discussion, it's a setup, an accusation disguised as curiosity. Clint tilts his head slightly, about to answer, but the host cuts in before he can even get a word out. Because let's be honest, he continues, barely containing his grin, if Dirty Harry were made today, it wouldn't be about a rogue cop taking justice into his own hands. It would be a cautionary tale about toxic masculinity, don't you think? More laughter. Someone in the back even claps. Clint's lips twitch. Not quite a smile, not quite a frown. He leans back, arms crossed, studying the host like a predator sizing up his prey. Well, he starts. Oh, and let's not forget. The host interrupts again, flipping through his notes. You actually talked to an empty chair at the Republican National Convention. That's a real moment in history. Do you think people still take you seriously after that? Another round of laughter. The audience is in on the joke now, emboldened by the host's confidence. A few murmurs ripple through the crowd, mocking whispers, amused snickers. This isn't an interview. It's a roast. Clint raises an eyebrow, but before he can speak, the host doubles down. Or how about your constant push for tough guys in movies? You know, the strong, silent type, the cowboy, the man who doesn't cry or show weakness. I mean, let's be real here, Mr. Eastwood. Your brand of masculinity is dying. Maybe it's time to admit that? The audience erupts, this time in full laughter, some clapping, others murmuring their agreement. The host leans back, triumphant. He knows he's hitting where it hurts. He's painting Eastwood as a relic, an out-of-touch dinosaur clinging to a world that no longer exists. Clint remains still, eyes sharp, jaw set, his expression unreadable. Oh, come on, the host presses, sensing victory. I mean, you're 93 years old, and you still think you're the tough guy in the room. That act might have worked back in the 70s, but now it just looks sad. The audience reacts with a mix of gasps and laughter, some even murmuring in discomfort. The line was a low blow, even for a setup like this. But the host is too drunk on the moment to care. He's convinced Clint is seconds away from breaking, from stammering, from showing his age, from walking off in frustration. He gestures dramatically, leaning in for the final jab. Honestly, at what point do you just hang it up? Do you think people really want to hear what Clint Eastwood has to say in the 2025? Silence. The host basks in it, believing he's delivered the final blow. The audience waits. The tension is thick, like the moment before a gunfight in one of Clint's old westerns. And then, Clint moves. Clint Eastwood shifts in his chair, slow and deliberate. The host leans in, expecting a flustered defense, maybe even an irritated outburst, something he can twist into another viral moment. But Clint doesn't give him that. Instead, he lets the silence stretch, lets the weight of the moment settle over the room like an approaching storm. Then he chuckles, low, gravelly, the kind of laugh that unsettles a man more than a shout ever could. You done? Clint asks, his voice calm, unbothered. The host blinks, momentarily thrown off by the composure. Well, Good? Clint cuts in, leaning forward now, elbows resting on his knees. Because you've been talking an awful lot, but you haven't said a damn thing. The audience murmurs. A few smirks appear. The energy shifts, subtle but undeniable. The host lets out a forced laugh. I think I've said plenty, Clint. You just don't like hearing the truth. Clint shakes his head, his expression unreadable. You think you're clever, don't you? Sitting there with your cue cards, your pre-written gotcha questions, hoping I'd walk in here unprepared, hoping I'd lose my temper so you could turn me into a headline. He lets that hang for a beat. Son, I was dealing with people like you before you were even born. The audience reacts, a mix of laughter and gasps. The host shifts in his chair, clearly not expecting Clint to be this composed, this surgical. Clint continues, voice steady. You call me outdated. Say my movies glorify masculinity, violence, tough men who don't whine about their problems. He nods, almost amused. And you know what? You're damn right. I make movies about strong men. Because the world still needs strong men. It always has. The murmuring grows louder. Some in the audience nod in agreement. The host scoffs. Strong men. Oh, come on, Clint. That's just another way of saying outdated, toxic, unwilling to change. Clint raises a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I didn't interrupt you, son. Have the decency to let a man finish his thought. The audience reacts. An audible ooh rippling through the crowd. The host's smirk falters. Clint doesn't let up. You think it's clever to sit here and call me old? Call me irrelevant? That's fine. Age isn't a weakness, it's a privilege. You think being young makes you wise, makes you right? He lets out another low chuckle. No, kid, it just makes you loud. The host forces a smile, but it's thin now, tight around the edges. Clint, look, I respect your career, but the fact is, Hollywood is moving on. Audiences are moving on. People don't want outdated ideas of masculinity shoved down their throats anymore. Clint nods slowly, then leans in. You know who people are? The ones who sit behind cameras, behind teleprompters, deciding what the rest of the world is allowed to think, allowed to say. People like you? The audience stirs. A few claps ring out. The shift is happening. Clint's voice drops lower, more intense. But let me tell you something. Real people, the ones out there working 2 jobs, raising kids, fighting to keep their families together. They don't have the luxury of sitting around debating whether being strong is a problem. They don't whine about masculinity. They depend on it. The host opens his mouth to interrupt. But Clint barrels through. They depend on men who don't break down when things get tough. Men who don't apologize for standing up, for protecting their own. You sit here in your nice little chair with your studio lights and your hand-picked audience, and you think you're speaking for the world? Son, the world doesn't even know your name. A louder reaction now. Scattered applause, murmurs of agreement. The host's face tightens. He wasn't expecting this. He wasn't expecting Clint to control the conversation. Desperate to regain ground, the host scoffs. Oh, please, Clint. This is the same tired rhetoric that people like you have been pushing for decades. The world is changing, whether you like it or not. Clint shrugs. The world always changes, but the truth doesn't. The crowd reacts again. The host, growing frustrated, shakes his head. Look, I get it. You're clinging to an old ideal. But the fact is, we've moved past the need for tough guy heroes. That's why your kind of movies aren't what they used to be. Clint smiles, and then, with perfect, deliberate timing, he delivers the kill shot. Son, if that were true, you wouldn't be so desperate to tear me down. Silence. And then, an eruption. Applause, whistles, even some standing up. The host's face goes pale, his grip tightening on his cue cards. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to humiliate Clint Eastwood, not hand him the moment of the night. The clip is already being cut, tweeted, posted. Clint Eastwood just ended that reporter's entire career. The host thought he had Clint on the ropes. Clint reminded him who he was. This is why legends don't fade. They just wait for the right moment to remind you why they're legends. The host shifts in his seat, rattled. The audience is no longer completely on his side. The energy in the room has flipped, and he knows it. But he isn't ready to give up yet. And that's when he makes his biggest mistake. Within minutes of Clint Eastwood's mic drop moment, the internet goes into a frenzy. The clip spreads like wildfire across social media, each platform amplifying the fallout. Twitter/X is first to explode. The hashtags Eastwood clapback, legend versus liberal, Eastwood owns TV host start trending within the hour. The reactions range from admiration to complete devastation of the host's credibility. Patriot Mike 87. Clint Eastwood just showed the world what real masculinity looks like. That host got wrecked on his own show. Legend. False Liberaliza 23. I don't care how famous Clint Eastwood is. His outdated views are dangerous and toxic. Stop glorifying this nonsense. Time to retire at the real Dale. The host set a trap and walked into one instead. Never try to outmaneuver a man who's been playing the game longer than you've been alive. Eastwood clapback. Clips from the interview are everywhere. Memes flood the internet. One particularly viral clip captures Clint's devastating line, "If that were true, you wouldn't be so desperate to tear me down." Underneath the video, thousands of comments agree. You can see the moment the host realized he lost. This is why legends never die. This was a masterclass. Clint just destroyed woke Hollywood in 2 sentences. But the damage isn't just limited to Twitter. YouTube and TikTok are next. Multiple versions of the clip flood YouTube, racking up millions of views within hours. Reaction channels dissect every second, emphasizing the way the host's expression changes when he realizes he's lost control. Political commentators jump in. Ben Shapiro, "This is what happens when you try to cancel a man who doesn't care. The left-wing media wanted a hit piece, and instead, they got a lesson in dominance." Joe Rogan, "Clint Eastwood just reminded the world why he's Clint Eastwood. That wasn't an interview, that was an execution." On TikTok, younger audiences jump in with their own takes. Gen Z users, many of whom weren't even alive during Clint's peak years, are suddenly huge fans. The Real Maverick, 5 million views. "I thought Clint Eastwood was just some old guy my dad liked, but after watching this, respect, he bodied that dude." Culture Wars 2024, 8 million views. "Modern Hollywood wants weak men. Clint Eastwood reminded them what strength looks like." Meanwhile, Facebook explodes with boomer and conservative audiences sharing the clip non-stop. The narrative becomes clear. Clint Eastwood just single-handedly took down the modern, soft media. The sponsors start to panic back at the network. Executives scramble. The host's show is hemorrhaging credibility. The producers try to control the damage, issuing a vague statement, "We stand by fair and open discussions, but also recognize the importance of evolving conversations in media." It does nothing to stop the bleeding. Corporate sponsors begin quietly pulling out. One by one, they distance themselves from the show. Nike, Coca-Cola, and Progressive Insurance remove their ads from the host's time slot. A major bank pulls its sponsorship, citing negative brand association. Behind the scenes, Executives hold emergency meetings. Is the host too toxic to keep? The political and celebrity reactions. The controversy doesn't stop with social media. High-profile figures start weighing in. Elon Musk tweets, "Clint Eastwood understands human nature better than 99% of modern Hollywood. Respect." 45 million views. Donald Trump Jr. This is what happens when a legend walks into a rigged fight and wins anyway. Weak men fear strength. Eastwood clapback. Jordan Peterson. The host underestimated wisdom. Youth without humility is arrogance. But it's not just conservatives. Some Hollywood A-listers break rank and support Clint. Mark Wahlberg, much respect for Clint. You don't disrespect a legend and expect to get away with it. Chris Pratt. The host walked in thinking he was the alpha. Clint reminded him what real confidence looks like. On the other side, progressive celebrities rush to defend the host. Seth Rogen. Clint's movies are cool, but this is strong men nonsense is tired. Get with the times, man. Alyssa Milano. Another day, another old man, whining about how the world is changing. Boo-hoo. The fallout grows bigger. The network realizes it's losing control of the situation. Their host is becoming the face of weakness. Ratings are plummeting. People boycott the show, refusing to watch. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood, his reputation skyrockets. His older films, Gran Torino, Unforgiven, Dirty Harry, shoot to the top of streaming charts. Young audiences, who never cared before, suddenly call him an icon. Netflix and Amazon see a massive surge in views for Clint's films. Clint's book, sales double overnight. Podcast invites flood in. Everyone wants to hear his take. The message is clear. Clint didn't just survive the ambush, he won. The network's desperation. Behind closed doors, executives panic. They discuss whether to fire the host. He's become a liability, and advertisers are dropping out daily. A leaked, internal email surfaces. The backlash is worse than expected. The board is considering disciplinary action to distance ourselves from the controversy. More bad news hits when anonymous employees leak damaging information. The host had pre-planned the attack. He was given talking points designed to provoke Clint. Producers coached the audience to react negatively to Clint, cueing laughs and interruptions. Studio executives greenlit the segment, knowing it would be controversial, but now it's backfiring. Clint's final word. Amid the chaos, Clint Eastwood remains unfazed. When asked about the controversy, he simply responds, "The truth always wins. You can't cancel a man who doesn't care." It becomes one of the most shared quotes online. His fans rally harder, and the network's show continues bleeding viewers. By the end of the week, the writing is on the wall. The host's career is on the brink. Sponsors have fled. Clint Eastwood, more powerful than ever. And just when it seems like it can't get worse for the network, Clint makes his next move. The lawsuit is coming. The fallout from Clint Eastwood's viral clapback reaches a new level when his legal team announces a lawsuit against the network. The claim? Defamation, manipulation, and intentional reputational harm. The legal document lays out the case with brutal precision. The network deliberately misrepresented Clint's words, cutting and editing previews to make him look bad before the full interview even aired. They coached the host to steer the conversation into hostile territory, setting up an ambush rather than an honest discussion. Studio insiders confirm that producers planted audience members to laugh, jeer, and interrupt Clint on cue, a pre-orchestrated takedown. The show intentionally distorted Clint's views, framing him as problematic to cater to a younger, progressive audience. Eastwood's legal team doesn't just accuse, they bring evidence. A leaked email from a producer reads, "We need to corner him on the masculinity angle. Get him flustered. If he gets defensive, we win." Text messages show executives discussing potential headlines before the interview even happened. If Clint takes the bait, we have our viral moment. A behind-the-scenes recording surfaces where the host is caught bragging about how he planned to break Eastwood on live TV. When the evidence hits the press, it destroys the network's credibility. Every major outlet covers the scandal, dissecting the premeditated setup. The New York Post, leaked emails prove host targeted Clint Eastwood in a rigged attack. Fox News, media caught red-handed, the Clint Eastwood smear campaign exposed. Rolling Stone, a Hollywood icon versus a media hit job, how Clint Eastwood fought back. The network scrambles. They issue a public statement claiming the interview was misunderstood and not meant to be confrontational, but no one buys it. The whistleblowers speak out. The lawsuit emboldens former employees from the network to come forward. What they reveal, shocking. A former producer confirms that the show regularly targets conservative and old-school Hollywood figures to create viral moments. They wanted a boomer takedown for social media clout. A sound technician admits that they artificially adjusted audience reactions, increasing the volume of laughs and murmurs during the interview to make Clint look weaker. An ex-staff writer reveals that the host was under pressure to make a statement against Clint or risk losing relevance. The execs told him, "This is your moment, take him down." This isn't just an embarrassing moment for the show, it's a full-blown scandal. The network goes into crisis mode. As more evidence leaks, the network's stock price starts to fall. Investors panic. Advertisers begin pulling out permanently. 2 executives resign overnight. Legal analysts predict the network will settle Clint's lawsuit to avoid an even bigger public relations disaster. The host, once a rising media star, goes silent. He disappears from social media and skips his next scheduled show. There are rumors that he's been temporarily suspended while the network decides how to handle the crisis. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood remains unbothered. When asked about the lawsuit by a journalist, he smirks and says, "They played stupid games. Now they're winning stupid prizes." The internet explodes again. Another viral moment, another brutal truth bomb from a man who refuses to be cancelled. And just when it seems like the story couldn't get any worse for the network, Clint's next move seals their fate. As the lawsuit gains momentum, the network is forced into a corner. Their attempts to downplay the scandal fail spectacularly. Public trust in the show collapses overnight, and viewership plummets. Major sponsors cut ties immediately, distancing themselves from what is now considered a toxic brand. The fallout is unprecedented. After weeks of damage control attempts, the network makes a final, desperate move. They suspend the show indefinitely. The official statement claims this is to allow for a thorough internal review of journalistic ethics, but everyone knows the truth. The show isn't coming back. The host's career implodes. With the show's cancellation, the host, once a media golden boy, becomes unemployable. His contract is quietly terminated, with sources claiming the network no longer sees him as an asset. His social media accounts are flooded with ridicule, with people calling him out for arrogance, deception, and failed gotcha tactics. Hollywood elites, once his allies, begin to distance themselves. Even progressive media figures call him reckless and a liability. A former staffer leaks behind-the-scenes footage of him having a meltdown after the interview, screaming about how Clint ruined him. The clip goes viral. While the host is spiraling, Clint Eastwood is doing the exact opposite. Clint becomes more powerful than ever. Eastwood's unapologetic stand against media manipulation doesn't just resonate with his fans. It electrifies the cultural conversation. The internet rallies behind him. His old films see a massive resurgence in popularity. Streaming numbers skyrocket. He gets a wave of new support from Hollywood veterans who admire his fearless stance. Media outlets that once ignored him now rush to book interviews. But Clint doesn't take the bait. He doesn't go on an apology tour. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't seek revenge. Instead, he lets the truth speak for itself. When asked in an interview about the scandal, he simply says, "I don't care what they think of me. I care what's true." The line becomes legendary. A viral moment all over again. The final blow, the lawsuit's outcome. The network, now drowning in negative press and financial loss, finally caves. They settle Clint's lawsuit out of court, reportedly paying him a multi-million-dollar sum. Internal investigations reveal systematic media bias, forcing leadership changes. Other celebrities start speaking out, exposing similar manipulations they've experienced. It's a reckoning, a turning point in how the public sees media spin, bias, and agenda-driven narratives. The ultimate message: truth wins. The scandal isn't just about one interview, it's about a culture shift. People are tired of scripted narratives and manufactured outrage. Clint Eastwood stood his ground and proved that authenticity will always outlast deception. And as the dust settles, the internet does what it does best. It immortalizes the moment. Memes flood social media. They tried to cancel Clint, but he canceled them. Never bet against a legend. The media wanted a moment. Clint gave them a lesson. The final nail in the coffin. The show is permanently cancelled. The network never recovers its credibility. And Clint, he remains untouchable. If you care about the truth, share this video.